please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Omegon 2. Today we're going to be looking at two videos from TikTok concerning Black History Month. One discussing equity, the other discussing white supremacy. As this will be done through a North American lens, it is a very skewed interpretation of equity and a very skewed interpretation of supremacy. I should state a disclaimer, I personally don't care for separating history or respecting of one's own history as a nation down to 1 month. I think if you're going to teach or educate, it shouldn't just be that. I firmly believe that if it is a fundamental part of your history, your culture, it should be every month with the rest of your history. But that could be my UK coming out here because we Brits, we do have a history month, yes, but its, I'd say, popularity, its notoriety has only really grown in the past decade, because prior to that we spoke about it with reverence and respect, like most history from our culture. Although it's somewhat amusing, I guess, that in the 10 years that I've noticed it, it has gotten to the point where essentially it is used as an excuse to crap on other people, cause with no solutions provided. That's important, because the first video we're going to get to has a solution for you.
Hey white men.
Ooh, that's not a good opener on social media, is it? I'd put money on you, DJ Cali MD, getting a fair amount of flack on your TikTok for that. And based on the fact your account at time of recording is currently private, I'm pretty sure I'm right. Yes, celeb.
Due to systemic and structural racism that Black women have had to endure, they only make 64 cents to every dollar that you make.
Because this is a pay gap argument, a gendered one as well as racial one, I am compelled to play a very old clip of Sean Head explaining this years ago.
The wage gap is simply the average earnings of men and women working full-time. It does not count for different job positions, hours worked, or different jobs. It has nothing to do with the same job. It has nothing to do with discrimination.
Sean Head is not wrong, okay? It is vitally important to understand this. There are many factors that play a part in why women, Black women, any woman of any race really, not earning as much as others in this white male counterpart apparently making most. Oh, and by the way, singling out white men. In your country, Asian men typically earn $1.15 for every dollar earned by a white male worker. But I don't see you going after them. You're a doctor. You deal in fact. How stupid are you? Then again, when you're going to espouse your beliefs and then hide behind a private button because you can't handle the blowback.
So as a fitting start to Black History Month, I want to take what you will make today, multiply it by 64%, and then take that difference and give it to some Black women today.
Firstly, that is the single dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Cost of living has gone through the roof, and I'm sure many people are struggling to get by even if they are making more than you. Second, I can imagine many people get very confused to be offered money and their pride will tell them to tell you to take your virtue signaling and shove it up your ass. Third, this is a terrible idea of solving the gender pay gap, because what you're doing is tearing someone else down under the guise of, but during this month and this month alone it's a great idea, when in reality, you're not elevating anyone during this month. That is what you should surely be wanting to do, championing other people to try and raise them up. Yes, it is a terrible idea because it puts other people financially in trouble. You can say, but you've benefited from privilege. That does not change the reality of the present. It also says, by the way, if you earn less because of your personal choices than somebody doing a similar job in a different state, then you, the white person making more money for doing the same job in a different state or location or place and time, doing more hours perhaps, are solely to blame for this inequity, and you must pay the money, the piper, the tax, the race tax. Oh god. Give it time, that'll be a thing. It's embarrassing to think of. If you think otherwise, you're stupid.
This shows that you are honoring them, that you are appreciating them, and that you are dedicated to equity. And Black women, you know what to do.
Firstly, no, it does not show any of that at all. As I've stated, it looks like a virtue signal from a white savior. That is how it will be used, and you know I'm right, Dr. Callie, MD. You know I'm right. Everyone knows I'm right. White savior complex, virtue signal, buzzy buzz buzz, you're all to blame, white men. And I have no idea, as a blue man, what black women are supposed to do at this point. Beyond, I would assume you're implying here, hold out your hands and go, please, white savior, can I have some more? It looks like begging, by the way. Is this the part where you now shill your crypto wallet or something? Equity does not solve any problems in this instance. And you know I'm right. Dr. Callie, you should be ashamed of yourself. You have worked to get to a position of being an MD. You make decent money. Obviously, we don't all become doctors for the sex, the drugs, and the rock and roll. But you have a decent job and you've earned it. Yet you are now talking about pay gap inequality when you yourself benefit from equality through occupation, knowing that hard work pays off. Granted, it doesn't work for everyone, and we know that to be true. That doesn't mean then what we do is we all give up our money, regardless of our race, to those who do not earn as much as us. For whatever reason, they don't earn as much as us. The second video is supremacy related. There are certain types of supremacy I'm quite fond of. Video game supremacy, of course. The console wars were quite educational, I will concede. And I'm sure there are still some people on this planet who think that certain supremacy based on the colour of their skin is a worthwhile endeavour. I will stand firm in my absolutist belief of no lives matter, because then your race really means nothing to me. But it does mean something to the following person.
As a racial justice advocate, I'm often invited to give talks or to do workshops where I talk to white people about race. Ali, according to their TikTok page, yes, is a racial justice advocate, and a lot of their content does center around racial justice, expanding racial justice, discussing different states' issues, yes, along with subjects concerning tokenism and mega churches. They get sod all views on TikTok doing this, and they don't have as many followers as Dr. Callie, but this is what they do, and they get invited to do stuff. They even write their own books on racial justice. How exciting. I'm so happy for you to be a racial justice advocate and turn something like that into anything beyond a grift. A big part of my practice is to offer real life stories, examples, that type of thing, that help white people to be able to identify white supremacy in everyday life.
Well, we all make mistakes, and I'm sure everyone in your life is well and truly proud of you for being nothing more than a complainer, rather than a problem solver, because that's often the problem I take with advocates for certain types of justice. Social justice, racial justice, invariably centers around the idea of not seeking to provide a solution that doesn't involve tearing someone down for something they have no control over. You're the person that in a relationship would say it's not what you say but how you say it. That's you. It's quite embarrassing, really. I always preferred to find a solution to a problem, but as we know from many videos we've covered on this channel and on the main channel, that's not what racial justice advocates look for. They somewhat charitably look for things that can be considered a listen and believe worthy moment. Yes, I said moment. To then use it as a wider point that doesn't really stick true, which is why many people who are considered racial advocates or racial justice advocates don't really gain much in the way of traction on social media, because it turns out, on social media especially, everyone hates each other regardless of race. Additional point to make, you are invited to go and speak to white people and shame them for the colour of their skin. I don't think that's a worthwhile endeavour, and I would consider it a form of bullying if it weren't so normalised in current society.
My husband's family is white, and I often use the cultural differences between my family and his family as a way to help white people see their whiteness.
There is something quite peculiar to me about somebody being a racial justice advocate to dunk on those that are white, because they're white, whilst marrying or being married to somebody who comes from a white family, which is a very peculiar turn of phrase that had me think that perhaps your husband is not themselves white but adopted. But with a vast number of racial justice advocates I've covered on this channel, a lot of them, majority in fact, most if not all of them, are married to a white person. I find that quite strange, although it also implies your husband is the submissive. There's another word for that, but we don't talk about that here. We're all primal, right? Alpha and everything.
There's one example that I use that always gets a ton of pushback. My husband and I were late to our first Thanksgiving with his family. I say late because it started at 12. We got there at 12:10, but whenever we got there at 12:10, everybody was already sat down and eating.
So you were late then. Timekeeping is vitally important to myself as a blue man, Vitally important to the point I will arrive at any appointment or any location up to an hour earlier so that I don't run the risk of being late. If I'm using public transport, I will try and get an earlier train. Otherwise, walking, I will time it and get it down to about 30 minutes. Because that way I can ensure I am not only on time, but there's no risk I do not arrive late. Tardiness is not acceptable. We shall not tolerate it in civil society. You were late. You were lucky to get any food at all, quite frankly. If you were at my home for any meal, I would have made you sit outside with the rest of the oiks and your husband.
I didn't know that. I use this illustration to point out that different cultures have different understandings of time, lateness, and what it means to be polite.
You do realize in this context you've made it seem like Black Americans or African Americans are thick or incapable of telling the time, right? And that if you cannot abide something as simple as turning up on time, you do not understand the concept of respect either. This in turn speaks volumes about what you think of your in-laws. You've just made a wider point that doesn't work as well as you would like it to. Surely by your own logic, white people in America should be campaigning for African Americans to learn the sodding time.
Without fail, a white person will push back and say that lateness is impolite.
I think you'll find it is not just a white person thing. Why don't you do something like that in Japan? See how well it's received. In fact, try it in any country that abides very simple rules when it comes to punctuality, which you'll find in a vast majority, in fact. It is not a racial thing, but if you're going to try and shame somebody for abiding the ability to tell the time and respect the time and the terms of the time, then I think you might be fighting a losing battle, because you're stupid.
I always use this as a teachable moment.
Well, I for one certainly hope you learnt your lesson.
I usually ask a series of pointed questions that challenge their assumptions.
In the context of the story you just told, though, what assumptions are there that you can challenge beyond your inability to tell the time or turn up on time? Neither of which are assumptions. They are verifiable because you were 10 minutes late. Or, to be more precise, you were about 45 minutes late, because a smart person would get there early enough to fraternize with the subordinates.
Sometimes it takes a lot of work, but by the end they're able to identify how white cultural dominance works in this one small area of life.
If it is white cultural dominance, to be able to not only tell the time, arrive on time, fraternize on time, and enjoy a meal at the same time as everyone else, and not be fashionably late, then you may want to get on board with that one, because that one is not just white, I can promise you that. You American-centric moron. You are not the center of the world or culture. Your culture is backwards and third world at best. And for those who got sensitive to that remark, I was only aiming it at the more progressive regions that don't realize how backwards they're behaving.
Which opens the door for them to start peeling the onion.
That was the part where the video cut off, and I find that quite a fascinating remark of peeling the onion, as if their problems are to be peeled back to find out what's at the center. You'll find, based on how the mentality of this kind of critique goes, there are infinite numbers of layers because the problem will never reach its center to allow for the individual you are peeling to evolve, grow, or change based on your arbitrary standards. Much like the first video, I'm going to say to you what I should have said to them as well. Grow up.